Ah, there we go. Hold on a second. So this is so cool. I love seeing all the, like, again, all your names and faces pop up. Hey, oh my gosh, so fun. Hey guys, to see both current students and alumni, so fun. Okay, yeah, I hope you're all doing well. Not going too crazy yet with being, you know, sort of locked away at home. Oh, you know what I realize I'm going to have to do is a screen share. But really, this is so great to like see all of you.
Amir, please make it lower.
Okay, wait, hold on. Let me open the source sheet that we're going to need. Hold on one second, and then I'll do a screen share after. Here we go. Okay. Perfect. Okay, we'll give people another minute or two, and then I'll get started. Yeah, hope you're all doing well. Wait, hold on. How will I do it? Oh, I see their screen share. Okay. Yeah, hope you're all good. So fun. Hold on. Let me shut my phone. Okay, I feel like should we just start? Because I feel like for those of you who are here, I don't want to just keep you waiting. Okay, I think we'll start. But really, like, you should just know, like, I'm seeing all your names and your faces, and like, yeah, it would take too long to read them all out. But like, I see all of you, and it's making me really happy. So really, welcome, and thank you to all of you who joined. Like, really, it's really great to see you guys. Okay, I really mean it. It's like I want to like say hi to everyone. Okay, maybe I'll WhatsApp you guys after. Okay, here we go. So let's get started. So what I wanted to talk about, it's what I titled it, is the first matzah in the Torah. I even saw it, which makes sense that it could get mixed up. That sometimes, like Shal Roda is the first matzah, and sometimes the first Pesach. But I don't mean the first Pesach. I actually mean the first matzah. Does anybody know what I'm referring to? Which is, let me explain a drop more. The first time that matzah is mentioned in the Torah, and as somebody eating matzah in particular, it actually has nothing to do with Pesach or with Yetziat Mitzrayim. It's actually a character in Sefer Bereshit who eats matzah for the first time. Anybody know who it is? I guess whatever you keep it. So I heard somebody say Abraham. The Midrash says that Abraham prepared matzah, but in the pshat of the psukim, it does not. I actually checked today to see, because I also was like, wait, shoot, am I wrong? Does Abraham? But it does not, at least in the pshat of the psukim, it does not mention Abraham eating matzah, though the Midrash does say so, but not in the pshat of the psukim. Anybody know who in the pshat of the psukim actually explicitly says that he ate matzah?
Was it Lot?
Yes, very good. Who said, oh my God, good job. Yes, Lot eats matzah. Okay, so if you, hold on, let me do a screen share, although that's annoying because when I do screen share, then I can't see your faces, but okay, whatever, what are we gonna do? We need to see the sources. Okay, hold on, here it is. Yeah, can you guys see it? Yeah, just like nod or thumbs up or something, yeah? Okay, excellent. Okay, so if you take a look, Breshit Perek Yotzed, again, so this is like early in Sefer Breshit, like the Jews haven't even made it to Egypt yet. This is like way earlier. It's describing when the angels come to Sodom to save Lot, right, who's sort of sitting there, and basically, right, the destruction of Sodom is pending. And, right, basically Lot greets them, and he basically says, right, please come, come to my house and I'll take care of you. And first, probably because they know that this will endanger him, or maybe they want to test him, who knows. But either way, they first say, no, don't worry about it, we'll sleep in the street. And then Pasuk Gimel says, right, he really pressures them, like Lot really wants to do the Hachnasat Orchim, Vayasuru Elav, so they listen and they come to him, Vayavo El Beito, they come to his house, Vayas Lahem Nishtere, he makes some type of a festive meal, Umatzot Afa Vayochelu. Okay, this is the first time in Torah that it describes somebody as explicitly like baking matzah and eating matzah. Okay, is actually Lot with the angels before the destruction of Sodom. And interestingly, and sort of not so surprisingly, given, right, Rashi and Chazal, Rashi on the spot says Pesach Haya. Okay, that it was Pesach, right, and that's why Lot is baking the matzah. Now, I read an article from Rav Yoel ben Nun, which who actually was a Rav Nachum Liebtag's teacher. He quotes him often. If for those of you who are taking him, probably recognize the name. And he wrote this like excellent article that really like impacted me, where he actually described how as a kid he saw this Rashi, right, where Rashi says that it was Pesach on that night that the angels come to save Lot from Sodom. And as a kid, he was like, I'm sure something that a lot of us have felt, and maybe not even as kids, right, where he was like, oh, that's so ridiculous. Like there's Chazal and Rashi again. Like just because it mentions matzah, they're saying it's Pesach. Like that's absurd, right? Like the Jews haven't even made it to Egypt yet. Like to claim that because he's eating matzah, it must be Pesach is ridiculous. Like the whole story hasn't even happened yet. And not only that, but there's lots of like pshat reasons to suggest why he might be baking matzah, such as the fact, right, that like he knows that this is a really dangerous thing to be doing, to be inviting guests in. And in fact, the very next pasuk that I didn't bring, pasuk Dalet, oh, actually, it's in the chart underneath. You can see whatever it is. Literally in the very next pasuk, like the townspeople surround his house and are like demanding the guests. So like it's not crazy on a pshat level that he might have wanted to bake bread that would go very quickly so that he could like get this whole thing over with, because this is a dangerous thing to be doing. And therefore, again, basically, Rav Yoel ben Nun wrote that as a kid, seeing that Rashi, he was just like, ugh, so ridiculous, so frustrating. Like, why do Chazal like do that? You know, like just because they mentioned matzah, assume it's Pesach, like so ridiculous. And then he wrote, and this was both meaningful in terms of like the maturation and like the coolness of like sort of being able to do this, and the content is awesome. He wrote though that when he got older and he sort of scratched beneath the surface, he realized that actually Chazal were onto something really deep. And the fact that they suggest, based on like the matzah, that it was Pesach was not because this was just Chazal like being like, I don't want to say silly, but kind of like, oh, matzah must be Pesach. But actually it was Chazal trying to like, almost like shake us into realizing there's something deep here, like don't miss it. And by saying that, oh, matzah, it's Pesach, it was actually them trying to alert us to ourselves scratched beneath the surface and notice that there's something really, really much deeper going on here. So what did he mean? What Rav Yoel ben Nun pointed out in this article, and then I actually saw Rav Chanoch Waxman also did, so it's clear that, and anyway, it's just convincing, you'll see, I mean, I hope you'll agree. Actually, don't look at the chart yet too much, I can't make it go lower, is what he pointed out is that once you sort of look deeply at the two stories, there are tons of parallels between what he terms Yetziat Mitzrayim and Yetziat Sodom, meaning between the Jews leaving Egypt and Lot being saved from Sodom, which is super cool. And so he claimed that even though as a kid, he was kind of like, oh, this is so ridiculous. Why are Chazal saying because he ate matzah, must have been Pesach? He's like, oh, actually, Chazal were trying to alert us to notice, compare these two stories. There's like really something going on here. So again, I know it's kind of hard to do on Zoom, so if it's not working, I'll just spell them out, but let's try to maybe have participation. Like, I'm curious if you guys can like notice any. Again, I know it's hard on Zoom because you don't know whether somebody else is going to jump in, but let's try, and if it's not working, then I'll just lay them out, but it's more cool if you guys do some of it. Anybody have any thoughts on any parallels that there might be between the two? Again, some of them are already showing, but don't look at the chart. Yeah, and anyone want to try any? Again, I know it's hard, so if it doesn't work, I'll just say them, but can anyone think of any parallels between the two?
Well, it says they came Be'erev, like in the night.
Very good. The timing, Rav Yoel ben Nun points that out. The timing is very similar, where it starts, hold on, I'll even find that one. Somewhere in here is where it talks about here, like here in particular, although really I didn't bring all the psukim about the time, but you're exactly right. They come at night, which parallels exactly how we had to bring the Karban Pesach at night. And then it's kind of this all night long ordeal, so that it specifically says, Uchmo hashachar alav v'yitu malchim. So we know that they came at night, so it's literally an all night long thing, and it's only when dawn breaks that they're kind of rushing him out of there. And so too, like we know that they brought the Karban Pesach the night before, and then it's by Hi Betzim Hayom Hazeh, so it's also like this all night long thing. Excellent. Yes, he does point that out. Yeah. Anyone else wanna try any? Hold on, try not to.
Maybe that in both stories there's one person trying to redeem everyone. Like in the Egypt story, Moshe's trying to redeem all the Jews, trying to rescue them, and then in the Sodom story, we have Abraham who's working on behalf, like asking if there's anyone we can save, how many tzaddikim. And it's always
cool.
like
I actually
kind of on one person.
Very cool. Meaning sort of, I guess, because in some ways it's parallel and yet in some ways, but I actually think that's a super cool point that will actually highlight a lot of what we're going to try to say. I hadn't even thought of that one. That's a cool point, honey. Also good to see you. What's it called is what's it called? Yes, is that you kind of have this individual, right, who's kind of trying to like save the masses, right? That's really, again, I hadn't even thought of that one, and neither did Dolben raise that one, or Chanoch Waxman. That basically you have Avraham who, right, davens on behalf of Sodom, please, if there's 50, if there's 40, but interestingly, it's not successful. So this is in some ways a contrast, but Dafka, the contrast will highlight some of our points, so we'll come back to it, right? And then you have Moshe, who is also not just content to like be saved himself, he is away from all the danger. And yet, like, he still goes and tries to save the masses, except, of course, that in Moshe's case, he's successful, and in Abraham's case, he's not, other than, again, saving Lot. But again, I actually think that contrast will actually make some of our points. So yeah, that's a good one. Yeah, anyone else wanna try any? If not, again, it's fine. I'll throw out some more, but.
Well, there's Lavan being saved by someone else. So he's not the active participant. Someone comes to save him, like HaKadosh Baruch Hu.
Excellent.
You know,
Yes.
Marcos and whatever, you know.
Yes, so actually, to actually even take that one even further, but you're exactly right, where really, if we actually in a broad scope think about both stories, it's actually crazy how similar they are, in the sense that both are not even just, I'll take your core idea, which is about sort of these individuals, right, being saved, although actually in one case, it's Lot as an individual being saved, and in the other, it's like sort of the whole nation, but it's not just sort of individual or nation being saved, the nation from which they are being saved, and literally in a very physical way being brought out, right? Like, there's other stories of us being saved, like even Purim, which we just celebrated recently, right, where we're saved, but we're not brought out from the place, right? In both of these, it's very clear it's a being saved by being brought out, and the culture and the entire society from which Lot / Bnei Israel are brought out is utterly decimated, right? In theory, Lot could have just been brought out and whatever it is, or Am Yisrael could have just been brought out and the Egyptians could have gone on their merry way without Bnei Israel. It's like so striking, right? So somebody is saved. They're saved by being brought out. The culture from which they're brought out is utterly decimated. And it's not even just that, say, this individual / nation, again, Lot / Bnei Israel, are brought out from this culture that's decimated. The end of both stories is not merely the salvation of, say, Lot / Bnei Israel, it's the creation of the nation, right? Like, it is at this moment that Bnei Israel sort of go from being sort of this ragtag, you know, family who then are even our slaves, into really being a nation with a mission. And similarly, interestingly, the story of Lot, we might have expected that the story will end with him being saved and then he should just go off and live wherever he goes off and live. It doesn't. What's the tail end of the story? The tail end of the story is where Lot basically, again, does incest with his daughters. We'll come back to look at that. And ensues the creation of two new nations, right? Ammon and Moab. So that really, if you think about the stories in broad strokes, they're crazy similar. Again, about people being saved by being brought out from a place that is utterly decimated, and in their being brought out, they create, it's like the birth of a nation, again, either Am Yisrael or Ammon and Moab. Again, very, very strikingly similar in terms of just like the plot line. Yeah, anybody want to suggest others? Otherwise, we'll look at a few more. Some of them are specifically also about the words, so that would be hard to like know offhand, but when you see it, it really jumps out. You want to try? Otherwise,
Word Eved also just jumps out here.
which one, sorry?
Beit Avdechem, you know, so there's a, I don't know if it's
So interesting, Eved. I'm trying to think, do we see
I don't know.
it?
Anyway, I just
didn't even
saw it, but you said word, so anyway, whatever.
Yeah, cool. Anyway, well, let's take a look and we'll see. So again, so the first one is like the most striking. That again is sort of what even Rashi and Chazal point out, and that's kind of what alerts our attention is the matzah, right, being baked. But what's also cool is that in the story of Yetziat Mitzrayim, right, we bake matzah because, as we know, we're rushed out, and so there's no time to delay. If you take a look, that word, where it specifically says, right, Ki gorshu miMitzrayim v'lo yachlu lihit mameh, right, we're chased out of Egypt, we can't delay, right, and that's why we bake matzah, right? If you look down, I had brought this as the first one really because of the matzah, but I bring it a second time because of that word, because it's so striking, right? Here it's the same pasuk again. That same word, which is very, very rare. I actually meant to look in the Concordancia and I forgot to, so I don't know if it appears anywhere else in Torah, but if it does, maybe it would be one or two other times. It is not a common word. It could even be these are the only two times. Again, I forgot to double check, so afterwards we should all check and see. But like that word abayit mama, which means to like to delay or to tarry, is very, very rare. And the fact that it shows up in both, right? In the Yetziat Mitzrayim story we're familiar with, right? That we couldn't delay, and that's why we have our matz instead of challah, because right, we have to rush out so fast. And he uses that identical word by Lot, that he was delaying, and therefore the anashim / right malachim had to grab his hand in their hands and be like, no, like go out already. But again, the appearance of that word, such a rare word in both, is already like, you know, jumps out as like, oh my gosh, like the Torah is calling us to compare them. And again, then when you add that they both have matz, and you add that the storylines are so similar, and still let's even see some others. If you take a look, we also see that there's a heavy emphasis on the home, and in particular on the doorway even, and on them being closed up in their homes, right? Like what happens in the story with Lot is that right after he invites them in for the meal, as we had said, right, that was Pasuk Gimel, was the Pasuk we had looked at here, right, where they come and he invites them in and he bakes the matzah and they eat. The very next Pasuk Daled is where the entire nation comes. They surround the house, right? And basically, right, Lot goes out to them and they close the door after him. And ultimately, right, what ends up happening even a little bit later in the story is basically that all the townspeople are struck with blindness, right? Because, right, Lot had suggested, oh, please, please, please don't make me send out, right, my guests. I'll send out my daughters instead, and like the whole mess. But point being, right, they have to close the door and stay in the house, because if they would dare open that door, if they would dare, like, right, basically go out or anything like that, they're going to be attacked by the townspeople. They're literally like huddling in the house for protection, right? It's crazy that the Yetziat Mitzrayim is identical, right? They have to go in their house. They brought the Korban Pesach. What did they have to do with the blood of the Korban Pesach? Put it on the doorposts of their home. And it's crazy that both cases, it even keeps talking about the Petach HaDelet, right? If you see in Asad Lo Tabaytem, it's Lo Tapetach, right? They had to be by the door opening, right? And here again, they had to V'ish Vatem Lo Titu Ish Mi Petach Beito during the Yetziat Mitzrayim night, right? That night of Makat Bechorot, they literally could not leave their homes, and they have the blood on the doorpost to protect the doorpost of the home. And Am Yisrael like huddling in their homes for protection. Again, the similarity is so striking of them like being in their homes, like huddling for protection, the home service sort of serving as that protection. And if they would dare go out, they're going to be goners, right? In the case of Lot, because the townspeople will attack them. In the case of Yetziat Mitzrayim, because the Melech HaMashchit is out. And actually mentioning that word, the Mashchit, crazily enough, also shows up as almost like a milah hamancha in both stories, right? The mashchit, right, is the term used for like this destructive force that was out that night in Egypt, right? Again, it could have just said God. Like, it's very striking, right, that it sort of is using this word, the mashchit, as the one who's like wreaking havoc and doing makat bechorot. And then look, that same identical word appears twice in the story with Lot. Ki mashchitim anachnu et hamakom, right? We're going to destroy the place. That's what the angels say to Lot. And again, he says, "You like get up and get out of this place. Ki mashchit Hashem atir." God is going to destroy the city. So we've got that word, right? The lihitma mea, the delaying word, calling us to notice the similarity. This mashchit showing up in both places here and then twice here. Calling us to notice the similarity. Similarly, even the words that the angels use is, look at what they say to Lot that night. Vayomer, kumu tzi'u min hamakom hazeh, right? The angels say to Lot, get up and get out. Look at what Paro says to Moshe and Aaron. Kumu tzi'u, the identical phrase, get up, get out, identical phrase, right? Kumu tzi'u, in both places. I
actually heard like a beautiful concept about how the matza is really the symbol of our freedom, because it was our decision to leave at that time. Like when Hashem said like you have to leave, like we didn't say like, oh no, we want to wait for our bread to be leavened. We said like, okay, like we'll follow you, like we'll be with you, like we trust in you. And that's when the real freedom came, and that's why matza is the true symbol of our freedom, like not anything else but the matza, because we also like we made the decision like that like we're gonna follow like Hashem's derech, and that like we're not gonna like allow, like even though like, you know, he gave us the malchut and he gave us everything, like all these miracles, like the matza wasn't a miracle. It was like more of our decision to then choose freedom. Like it wasn't that it wasn't that the matzah was like, you know, needing to be unleavened. It was that we made a decision, and that's why we eat it, to remember that we
Very nice. Very nice. And
we
actually, I'm even going to come
followed.
back to the matzah as a major symbol. So hold that, like, it's a beautiful idea, and you'll see we're going to actually sort of come back also.
Do you
to, like,
remember
on
Dena
this
Freundlich,
also.
Rora's friend?
Yeah. Wait, sorry, was there another?
No.
Okay, anyway, so going back to the parallels, that we're just about done with them. One last one, though, that I want to point out is also,
Can I just ask you something?
is that in both cases, there are like mako. What, sorry? Did you say something?
No, can you ask people to go on mute?
Yes, I was also going to say that. Yeah, if everybody could mute. Most people I see are on mute, but I also hear noise in the background. If anybody who's not on mute, if you don't mind muting, because...
Thank you.
I think the host could also press mute all.
Let me see if I can figure out how to do that. Hold on, because since I have the screen share, I don't see most of what I usually see. Oh, wait, no, wait, let me see. I don't know, I don't see it. All right, well, at least for now, right? It seems better, I think. Okay. Okay, maybe if I stop the screen share, I'll see it. Okay, anyway, so one last one that I wanted to point out is that there's also kind of in a crazy way, this idea of like makot in both, okay? Like if you take a look, right, it says hiku basan verim, right? Using even that language of hiku, like a maka, right? That basically, again, when the townspeople surround the house of Lot, they are like smited, if that's like a word. What's it called with, oh wait, now I see it. No, I still don't see the mute all thing. Okay, whatever, it's fine. Oh, wait, maybe here? Mute all. There we go. Yes. Okay, yes, excellent. Right, but you can still hear me, right? Yes, okay, great. Okay, wait, how do I get rid of that? There we go. Okay, anyway, so point being, right, that there's this last one that I wanted to point out, that there's even this concept of like a maka also going on in the story with Lot, where they're all smitten, if that's the word, right, with blindness. Mikaton viad gadol, which also has this whole language by Makat Bechorot. Rav Hashem hika, again, it's hiku basan verim, hika kol bechor be'etz Mitzrayim, and it goes into very like descriptive language of, you know, mi bechor paro hayoshiv al kisoad bechor hashvi asher bebeit habur bechor bechor behema, even like everyone ein bayit asher ein shamit. And here again, this idea about hiku basan verim mikaton viad gadol, again, this very similar idea of this plague that's affecting all of them. So sort of putting that all together, I hope that you guys have all found this as compelling as I did. Like, again, because I didn't come up with the idea of looking for parallels. As I said, I saw it both in Rav Yoel Ben-Nun and Rav Chanoch Waxman. Though what we're going to do with them, I go in a different direction. But finding the parallels, once I saw it, I'm like, holy cow, oh my gosh, I like never ever noticed this before. And again, as I said, what I loved about what Rav Yoel Ben-Nun pointed out was that he said it was only that comment of Rashi pointing out that it was Pesach, which as a kid he thought was so silly. As an adult, he was like, oh my gosh, this was what clued him in, like compared the stories and find all these parallels that once you look for them, it's like, oh my gosh, like how did I never notice that? But there's tons of parallels, again, just to kind of sum them up. Number one, again, in that larger theme of, somebody being saved by being brought out from a culture that's utterly decimated, and that leads to the formation of a nation. We have, the matzah similarity. We have this petach habayit. We have the idea that they have to like huddle in their homes for protection, and if they go out, they're gonna, be goners. We have this idea about there being like a plague, and the plague affecting everyone. Mikaton viad gadol, or mi bechor paro ad bechor behema. And again, that word of the lehit mamea is again one of the most striking, that word, which is such a rare word, that they couldn't delay, or that what was delaying, and this was a problem, and therefore they have to rush him out. Oh, and actually this one last one is about that it describes the destruction of Sodom, is described as having gafrit va'esh, which is very strikingly parallel to the language of the barad, the vayhi barad va'esh. Again, just so many things calling out, oh my gosh, there's really something deep going on here. Clearly God is embedding these parallels in the Torah between, again, Yetziat Mitzrayim and Yetziat Sodom. The question, of course, assuming hopefully that it was convincing enough that there are in fact parallels, the question, of course, that all this begs, though, like all that is like, wow, cool, like interesting. But of course, the question is why? That's the $1 million question. What's the message of all these parallels? So I recommend go look for Rav Yoel Ben-Nun's article and Chanoch Waxman. They actually do different things than what we're going to do together. What's it called? What I would actually like to suggest is that perhaps, again, there could be other reasons also, and all of you can also think on your own of, any reasons you want to think of. To me, the fact that there are parallels embedded in the Torah between the two, that is like, I totally am convinced. Like, I think it's compelling. I think it's incontrovertible. The question of why, what do we make of this? What's the significance? That is like an open book. And again, could be that, one of you listening will, come up with some brilliant insight. If you do, please share it. But at least something that I had thought of is, I wonder whether maybe some of the reason why, when God is again telling us our story of our nation's birth, and telling us the story of Yetziat Mitzrayim, perhaps at least one of the reasons why he embeds in it all these hints that make us look back to the story of Lot, is that maybe it's kind of cool to think about that in the entire story of the birth of Am Yisrael, which is really actually the story of all of Breshit through basically the beginning half of Shemot, right, till this point, certainly through all of Breshit, there's this huge process, right, of Bechira and Nidche, right, of because basically God chooses Abraham, right, gives him the Lech Lecha command, promises he's going to make him into a great nation, and of course the enormous mystery and challenge running through most of Abraham's life is, how on earth is God going to fulfill this promise of making me into a great nation when I don't even have one single child? Forget a great nation, I don't even have one. How is this promise ever going to be fulfilled? And therefore, so much of his life, and really actually the entire storyline of Breshit, but certainly really of Abraham's journey in particular of Breshit, though it continues even past him, is sort of, again, the story of Bechira and Nidche, somebody being chosen and somebody being rejected. And in particular, in Abraham's case, is sort of this ongoing unfolding of contestants almost, right? Where first Abraham thinks, maybe it's going to be Lot, right? Lot is kind of the first contestant, or the first, I don't know the right word to call it, sort of who surely Abraham must have assumed, well, given that I don't have a kid of my own, surely Lot will be the one who's gonna, I guess, carry on this legacy and be the next link in the chain of this nation. He at least does share genetic overlap with me, right? He was a nephew. And Lot did come along on the journey to the promised land. Surely it would seem that Lot is going to be the next contestant. And I would really suggest, and we'll develop this through the rest of this year, that I really think that the development of Am Yisrael is always seen almost with Lot as the foil. And to a large degree, we can only appreciate what does in fact make us successfully get chosen and what our mission as Am Yisrael is, with Lot as the backdrop, or always looking at him as who came so close and yet in the end goes awry or goes astray. Dafka, our the process of Bechira Nidcha and understanding what makes us get chosen, ultimately what does work and what our mission is, it's always almost seen in light of sort of Lot and Sodom as the backdrop for almost learning from them as the foil of almost what not to be. So let's develop that and see what I mean. So first of all, as I was saying, right, surely it must be that that Lot is the obvious contestant. And by the way, just to point out something that I think is so cool, that I saw while preparing this, is interestingly, who of course is the second contestant after Lot, right? Lot's the first contestant, he's going to be rejected. In a second, we're going to look at that moment, because that I think is the critical moment. But who's the next contestant? Of course, is Yishmael. Well, actually, Eliezer, or Domestic, right? Who his servant seems to be one, but we'll leave that for a second. But who's definitely one of the major contestants? Of course, is Yishmael, who actually is Abraham's child. Of course, not Sarah's, but Abraham's actually own birth child, right? What's remarkable is that we are told about the rejection of Yishmael with literally one single word, right? What's that word? I'm impressed if anybody knows. If you do, you can unmute yourself for a second and shout it out. I mean, what's the single one word that we're told that gets Yishmael rejected from being, sort of basically gets him kicked out of the house, and that's the moment where he's cast off. Even what the one word is of what he does wrong that gets him kicked out by Sarah?
Mitzachek.
You, nice. Yeah, well done. Yes, Miri, good job. Mitzachek. You know what's unbelievable? I couldn't believe it when I noticed this. Lot is described with the identical word. Okay, now in Lot's case, it's not given as the reason for why, say, he's Nidche, but the fact that the identical word shows up by both here, I'll show you, it's here in the chart, right? Here's the pasuk about Yishmael. Vatera Sarah ben Hagar ha-mitzrata shel dala Avram mitzachek. And
What does that
one
mean?
word is what we're told that he does wrong that gets him kicked out of the house. Whereas,
Any
if you look,
definition for it?
What, sorry?
Is there a definition of that word?
Yeah, sorry. Mitzachek literally usually means laughing, though in this case it seems to be mocking, because it seems that it has to be something really bad, because like it makes her kick him out of the house, and Abraham doesn't even want to, and God comes and says, do it. So like it must be bad, even though it seems to just mean laughing. So like Rashi says, oh, it's like Avodas Zarah and Gilead and Shvichut Damim, and he brings psukim where like it uses that word in those contexts and whatever, but in the pshat it usually just means laughing, though clearly it's got to be something bad. Again, maybe mocking, but Rashi even says Gilead, Shvichut whatever, but mitzachek usually means some type of laughter or mocking. And if you take a look, that same identical word is used to describe Lot, right? Basically, Lot goes and tells his son-in-laws, again, there's that word, right? Get out, right? They're thinking, he's like, meaning they're just like mocking him. He must just be joking. This has to be a big joke. There's no way, right? So again, it's used in different ways, but the fact that that identical word shows up both by Ishmael and by Lot, to me is like, oh my gosh, it's like so cool. These are the two, like, almost make it, so to speak. They could have been the next link in the chain of Am Yisrael, but they're not. And the fact that the same word appears by both, I think really highlights this. So for Yishmael, the moment that he like loses that chance, so to speak, to be the next link in the chain of Am Yisrael is that moment when he's called the mitzachek, right? And he's kicked out of the house. For Lot, what's the moment that Lot like loses it, so to speak, and sort of is like cast off? Interestingly, it's not a moment that he is cast off. It's a moment that he chooses to leave, right? What's that moment? It's the moment that his shepherds and Abraham's shepherds have the fight over land. And what ends up happening is that Abraham sort of says, like, it seems we should go our separate ways. And look at what happens. Okay, I brought those psukim because they're really critical for us. Here, right, basically, again, it describes how, that they have, so much property, and so they're fighting, and it seems that there's not enough. And so Abraham says, right, let's separate. If you go to left, I'll go right. If you go right, I'll go left. And look at what happens in Pasuk Yud. Vayisa Lot et einav, vayar et kol kikar hayarden, kikula mashke, lifnei shachet Hashem et Sdom v'et Amorah. By the way, I think that's very significant that the Torah is like foreshadowing to us, this isn't going to end well. That is not a good place. Like the Torah is like letting us know, almost like in a stage whisper, that Lot, I guess, isn't aware. Again, this isn't going to end well. This isn't a good place. It's telling us already. It's before the destruction of it. Now look at how the Torah describes it. Ki gan Hashem, which is interesting. Ki eretz Mitzrayim. It's so it's almost like unbelievable, right? The Torah is describing Lot's choice of where to go when he is separating himself off from Abraham, as he is choosing to go to this land that is like the land of Egypt. And look at how the Torah describes what makes him go there. What lures him to this place that we are told in advance and foreshadowing it's going to be destroyed. This is clearly not actually a good place. Is that it's lush and it's gorgeous and it's wealthy and it's rich. And Lot, vayivchar lo Lot et kol kikar hayarden, vayisa Lot mikedem. He chooses that place. The lure of that beautiful, lush place lures him away from Abraham. And again, it's described as Keretz Mitzrayim, hugely significant. And in addition, hugely significant, is it describes it as vayisa Lot mikedem. Now, why is that significant? Because in Sefer Breshit lingo, going mikedem is always kind of this like sign of like galut, of like exile. Take a look, I brought underneath like the 3 examples, right? When Adam and Chava, the very first human beings ever, and the first human beings therefore also to defy God, when they're kicked out of Gan Eden, look at where they go. Vayigaresh et ha'adam, right? They're kicked out of Gan Eden. Vayashkein mikedem legan Eden et hakruvim elav, right? To guard the way. Similarly, right? The next sinners in Torah, right, are the next 2 human beings ever created, right? Cain and Hevel. When Cain kills Hevel and he's basically being punished to be this wanderer, look at what it describes. Vayitzei Cain lifnei Hashem vayeshev beretz nod kidmat Eden, right? And then similarly, of course, the next generation is actually the generation of Noah and the flood, who are just like kicked out of the whole world because they just drown. So they're not going east because they're not going anywhere, right? They just drown. But then the next sinners in the Torah. Again, if you notice, there's sort of this bad pattern in the beginning of Breshit, which is why we need Abraham to come along and like try to get us back on the right path. But sort of the next story of the sinners is the generation that builds the tower to try to attack God. And look at what it says. Vayhi kol artzafa achatu dvarim achadim, vayhi bin nos am mikedem. Like there's clearly this theme here. So when we get, again, notice it's Perek Gimel Daled Yud Aleph, this is only Perek Yud Gimel, because again, Abraham was just chosen like a chapter before. The fact that Lot is going Vayisa Lot mikedem, we as the readers of Breshit should be like, no, where are you going? Like, that's not a good direction. You're going to be like not part of the chosen nation. And it's so clear that this is the moment where he is lured again by the lushness and whatever it is, by this place that's like Eretz Mitzrayim, that makes him go mikedem. And this is the moment, right? Like Ishmael's moment of being mitzachek that gets him kicked out. This is the moment that Lot essentially, again, it sort of breaks paths with Abraham. And again, he's not a bad person. That's what I want to, discuss in a second. But this is the moment that he, though is a decent person, is not actually going to carry on, the mantle of the next generation of Am Yisrael. And so the question kind of, though, is like, well, why not? Like, what's going on here? And again, what are we supposed to learn from this? So I think to a large extent, and this is kind of what I was saying before, which is why I think it is so significant that by our Yetziat Mitzrayim, by the birth of our nation, that God is recalling us to look back to this moment of Lot, is because, again, it will be by looking at Lot, and in particular, of course, at Sodom, that we will to a large degree be able to appreciate what our mission is. But first, even in looking at Lot, and then I want to broaden it to looking at Sodom, right? Lot himself is not a terrible person, like far from it. Again, he does share genes with Abraham, but not just genes. He even shares many of Abraham's characteristics. He does hachnasat orchim at tremendous risk to himself, right? Like, and it's not even just that he does it half-heartedly and like invites them to come. They even say, no, it's fine, we'll sleep in the street. And he pressures them, right? It had said in those earlier psukim that we looked at right here, right? They say, no, ki barachovna lina vayivtzar ba me'od. He really is like, please, 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 even though it's a great personal risk. And he makes them a whole mishteh. He's not just giving them the bare basics. Again, well, matza might seem to us, right? The bare basics, but he does say, vayasla mishteh. Point being, he's like on the right track. Yet at the same time, we see that he like goes like astray. He's like so close and yet then goes astray. And this actually reminds me of the point that Chani made earlier, which is kind of cool, right? That like Moshe tries to save not just himself or not just his immediate family, but like the whole nation, and is successful. Avram tries to save, but ultimately it's not going to be. Actually, I even want to like come back to that. So even hold that thought, because I want to really come back to that when we talk about Sodom as a whole and not just Lot. But even thinking about Lot, right? Certainly Lot is not successful in affecting the people around him and making them realize the error of their ways and become better people or anything like that. But not only that, even Lot himself, right? When the townspeople surround his house and are like, send out your guests. Now, on the one hand, he's so heroic and he says, no, I will not send out my guests. But what does he suggest instead? I'll send out my daughters instead, right? It's like so clear that he's so close. He's like almost a hero, but like then he's so off. And similarly, even the way that the story ends, as we had said, right? Both the story of Yetziat Mitzrayim and the story of Lot's Yetziat Sodom end with the birth of nations. But in our case of Yetziat Mitzrayim, it ends with this incredible, right? The birth of Am Yisrael, who are marching on their way to Har Sinai to get the Torah. With Lot, it also ends with the birth of a nation, but in such a like depraved way. It ends with incest between him and each of his daughters, not even just one, but both of his daughters, which does result in the birth of nations, right? Ammon and Moab. But again, it's sort of that sense of like, he's so close, but then goes off and is like close, but doesn't, isn't able to fully make it, which again is why he starts off on the journey with Abraham. But ultimately, that moment where he goes mikedem and chooses Sodom is the moment he goes off. And I think that it is so striking in particular that it is Dafka Sodom. Now, why Dafka Sodom? Because, and I think that this really gets at the heart of why God again embeds all these parallels, so that as we're reading about Yetziat Mitzrayim and the birth of our nation, he embeds these parallels to Sodom, so that we look back at that story. Because I really think that sometimes we can best learn how we ought to be by looking at examples that are the opposite. Because sometimes it's by seeing like somebody who's not doing the right thing that we get it, where we're like, oh, that's wrong. Like that is everything we don't want to be. And sometimes that's how to best clarify who we do want to be, so that we can like really learn to take on the mantle of our mission. And I think that that is exactly the case with Sodom, because it's literally, it's not just like that Sodom is bad. Sodom could not be the literal more direct 180-degree opposite of Avraham, right? Avraham, he's a wonderful man of chesed, but what's his like shining star example? Hachnasat orchim. Sodom are not just like evil, they definitely refuse to let anybody take guess. Like they are literally the mirror images of each other to like the most extreme degree possible. And in fact, right before kind of God sends, right, the angels for the destruction of Sodom, we have this like remarkable piece. It might be the only time in Torah where this happens. I can't think offhand of any others, where we're actually privy to like this internal conversation that God is having with himself, right? Like I know I talk to myself all the time when I'm like trying to decide something. Like in fact, I often talk out loud and my kids are like, who are you talking to? But it's like really cool that like God kind of does that too, right? So I feel a little better. But again, there's, I think only one time in the Torah where we're really like privy to seeing that. And that is right before the destruction of Sodom, where God actually says, right, he basically, right, the people are going out, they're looking at Sodom, and God says, by Hashem Amar, right, it sounds, again, maybe I'm wrong, but it sounds always to me like he's talking to himself and kind of going back and forth within himself about what he should do. And he says, he's kind of like, should I tell Abraham what I'm about to do, Sodom, or shouldn't I? And he's really like not sure. And in the end, look at what he says here. He says, "Ki yidativ leman asher yitzaveh et banav et beito acharav," right? Because I know him, I know that guy Abraham, and I know that he's going to command his sons and his whole household after him. Vishamru derech Hashem la'asot tzedakah umishpat. Right? I know they're going to keep the way of God to do like justice and righteousness. And I think the incredible like power of this internal dialogue that God is choosing to share with us is the fact that why is this relevant? Like why does God have this internal dialogue with himself at all? And why does he share it with us? And I think and why, even within God trying to decide, should I or should I not tell Abraham, like, why is this like the relevant, like, piece that he's saying, oh, I know he's gonna, Shamru derech Hashem lasot tzedakah mishpat. I think the answer is that the reason why God does choose to tell Abraham is because he wants Abraham to know. He wants Abraham's descendants to know. And like, that's us, right? And why does he want us to know about this pending destruction of Sodom? Because it's not simply that there was this evil place in the world that God needed to get rid of. It was that there was this evil place in the world that God needs to send Abraham and Abraham's descendants, again, that's you and me, the message that this evil place gets punished and eradicated by God. You understand? Like, it's not simply that like bad place needs to be destroyed. Part of what was so critical was that Abraham and we should know about it. Why? Because it is so critical that we learn from that, number one, that like bad ways don't pay off. But more than that, I think it's by therefore, it's calling out to us. Look at Sodom, look at what they did, learn from everything that they did, like be the polar extreme opposite, which is exactly what Abraham is anyway in his essence. But again, the fact that God is choosing to tell Abraham, and again, he's emphasizing this. It's not even just about Abraham. It's so clear that like God wants Abraham and all of his future descendants to know this, because it is so critical for us to learn this by looking at and learning from Sodom and everything they do wrong, for us to literally look at them and build ourselves into being the polar opposite of that, being the mirror image, being the foil to that. That is our mission as Abraham's descendants. And again, I really think that that is largely why it is dafka at the moment of Yetziat Mitzrayim that God is calling our attention with all these parallels to look at Lot's Yetziat Sodom, because he wants us at the moment of our nation's birth to be looking at that story so that we realize this is not simply the story of like an oppressed nation that God is, swooping in to save from oppression for a sense of justice. This is about, again, the birth of a nation. And again, it's not even by looking at Lot, whose birth of a nation is through incest and Ammon and Moab. This is about the birth of a nation, but a nation with a mission. It's not just freedom for freedom's sake. It's freedom to then march to Har Sinai and get the Torah. It's freedom for the sake of creating a nation that will be la'asot tzedakah u'mishpat. And again, it's largely by dafka embedding like all these hints to the story of Lot and Sodom in the story of Yetziat Mitzrayim. So as we're reading about the story of our nation being formed and the story of our nation being taken out, right? That we're recalling that so that we can learn and appreciate it's not just about being saved. It's about being saved to form a nation, and a nation with a mission to be all of what is right in the world, not these kids mat Eden, not people who are going to be sort of rejected ultimately. And there's where I really want to go back to, again, to Chani's point from before, where Avraham, who is this man of utter chesed and tzedakah mishpat, davens to save Sodom. But unlike Moshe, who is successful in saving the nation, Avraham is not. And why is Avraham not? I think, again, that whole episode is to highlight Avraham's righteousness and justice and desire to help everybody, with the fact that Sodom did not even have 10 tzaddikim. But again, the point is for us to learn, right, to be the opposite. And so at least, again, I think there could be many other answers given as well. So I encourage all of you to still think about it, because as I said, the parallels to me are incontrovertible. The message we take from them, I think, is an open ballgame. I think there's so much that we can learn from this, but at least for me, that is definitely one positive thing that I really take. Oh, and one message I almost forgot. Oh, good thing I saw the last source. I didn't forget to make this last point, is, and this goes back a little bit also to Racheli's point, is that matzah then becomes the symbol of the holiday, right? And matzah was that very first, hint that was what made Rav Yoel ben Nun, because of Rashi, like, notice, wait, let's look for other, similarities between the stories. Why matzah? It's so cool, because what was it that lured Lot down to Mitzrayim was, again, the lushness of the land. What's so cool about how we celebrate Pesach? We celebrate it with this lechem oni, right? This poor man's bread, this bread that is like unbread. It's like the most flat, tasteless, right? And so in many ways, it's kind of stinks, right? I'm sure we would all much rather have challah, but I think that to a certain degree, matzah becomes the symbolism of Yetziat Mitzrayim, because it is the representation of us not doing what Lot did, not being lured by the lushness and the richness, but saying, no, we will have the matzah, we will have, right, the tasteless, whatever it is, because it's a mitzvah, and because we are not going to lose track of what our mission is, right? We won't be lured away, by the attraction of the lushness. We're going to be like the matzah. And by the way, also super cool, we start the Seder with halach ma'anya, where we invite kol dechvini tevi yifsach, right? We invite everybody who needs a meal to come and join us. Again, because I think that one of the huge statements that we're making at the Pesach Seder, both through the eating of matzah and through halach ma'ani at the beginning, is we are not Sodom. We are the opposite. We are the nation who begins by inviting everybody to come join us. Again, could not be more polar opposite of Sodom. And we're going to have the matzah that's like the unbread. And all of that, I think, is trying to, again, that on this night of Yetziat Mitzrayim and the formation of us as a nation, we are supposed to be recalling that night of Lot, so that we are clear and we don't lose sight of, again, what our mission and our goals are, which I think we can only fully appreciate sort of with Sodom and Lot as the backdrop. Yeah, anyway, so thank you all for coming and joining. It's really
Thank you so much.
As I said.
Thank you so much. That was so interesting.
Oh, thanks. Really, my pleasure. Really, thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thank you.
Dena.
Oh, hi.
Thank you. So wonderful.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Dena.
Sure, my pleasure. Really, really.
Oh, Dena?
Yeah.
Hello?
Yeah, hello.
Dena? Oh, hi, Dena. It's Terry. How
Oh
are
my gosh,
you?
hey, I didn't even see
I
you before.
missed
Thank you
you.
so much. Like, this is
I
really
know.
like,
I've been trying so hard to find you.
so send me my email in case you want. It's Dena, Dena, Leah, Leah 120 at Gmail. Like, please, all of you.
Yeah,
It's like
Leah,
so great.
120 at Gmail. Okay, yes,
Yes,
yes.
Dena, Leah,
Yes,
120
yes.
at Gmail.
Okay,
I'm happy to hear
great.
from any
Thank
and
you.
all of you.
Thanks so much. Bye-bye.
Sure. Oh, it's so great to see you. Like, all of you, really, really, really. So great.
Thanks.
Dena, is there any chance you'd be able to send the source sheet, like even just in the chat here?
Yeah, sure. You know what? Wait, how do I do that here? Meaning I can send it like on
If
the
you click
WhatsApp
file
that Cheryl has.
Oh,
Yeah, I'm
maybe
not great with technology. Wait, what do I need
No,
to
just
do?
get Cheryl to send it. Get Cheryl to send in the WhatsApp group.
Okay, great. That I can even do because I'm on that with those WhatsApp groups, so that I can do.
Oh, easy. Perfect.
Amazing. Okay,
Thank you.
really so great to see you all.
Lovely
Thank
to
you,
see
Dena.
you. Thank you.
Sure.